Well, good morning, and can I welcome everyone to this, the 11th meeting and final meeting of the Public Audit Committee in 2026. Agenda item 1 is for members of the committee to consider this morning whether to take agenda items 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 in private. Are we agreed? Yeah. We are agreed, thank you. And then our principal agenda item this morning is consideration of the Section 22 report into the 2024-25 audit of the Scottish Public Pensions Agency. So can I welcome our witnesses this morning? We're joined by Dr. Stephen Pathirana, who is the Chief Executive of the SPPA, and alongside Dr. Pathirana is Christopher Nairns, who's the Chief Operating Officer, and Francis Graham, who is the Chief Transformation Officer for the SPPA. And they are also joined by, from the Scottish Government, Leslie Fraser, who's the Director General Corporate. We've got some questions to put to you, but before we get to our questions, I'd like to invite you, Dr. Pathirana, to make a short opening statement.
Thank you, Convener. So good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to engage with the committee on the SPPA's progress to deliver a remedy following the publication of Audit Scotland's Section 22. We welcome Audit Scotland's unqualified opinion of our accounts and the recommendations in the annual audit report. We continue to work constructively with Audit Scotland as we address all areas for improvement. I would like to start by reiterating the apology I made to members when I appeared before the Finance and Public Administration Committee in December for the delays in delivering remedy. We have always sought to give accurate information to our members and with the best possible intentions shared estimated timelines based on our knowledge at the time. Knowing what we know now, and I'm sure other pension administrators feel the same, that we'd wish we'd communicated better earlier. We recognise transparency must accompany delivery for members to have confidence in the agency, and we continue to report openly on progress. And so I'd like to express my ongoing gratitude to our pension scheme members for their continued patience as we work to achieve the outcome we all want. That is, everyone who is eligible having been offered and made their remedy choice and seen this choice reflected in their payments. Of course, members have still been able to retire and receive their full pension based on the rules in place at the time. In fact, we estimate over 70% of retired members are already on the scheme that's most advantageous to them. As I said at the Finance and Public Audit Committee this morning, there was a collective underestimation of the scale and complexity of this project. Our pension scheme provider, along with others in the UK, were unable to provide us with technical solutions to remedy, to make the dual retrospective calculations needed to issue choice letters to approximately a third of our 600,000 members, as we've had to develop our own solutions. Through advances in our pilots in the police scheme, we have achieved economies of scale that are benefiting firefighters, NHS and teachers scheme. For example, we've cut the processing times for basic NHS pensions from 2 hours to under half an hour through a new calculation module. In fact, we've made significant progress in delivering digital transformation over the last 12 months. Our ongoing investment in people and IT will help deliver remedy and raise service levels for members in the future. We've digitised employer data for police and fire schemes, and we're now actively onboarding the teacher scheme with full digitisation expected by the end of 2027. We've launched a new member portal, Engage, across all 4 schemes. Functionality is evolving, and the portal will give instant access to a range of self-service options, pensions information and historic documentation and scheme guidance. We've released online pension modelers for police and NH members, offering instant remedy compliant pensions projections. Development of teachers modeler is in progress. As we look to the future, we are committed to completing remedy and investing in IT and data management services required to deliver the service to our members that they're entitled to expect from a modern pensions administrator. And I'm confident that we have the right governance structures in place to support this journey. Our Management Advisory Board and Risk Committee scheme-specific pension and advisory boards all support us in delivering our work, ensure that we meet our statutory obligations. We're delighted with the progress we are making under our new Audit and Risk Committee Chair, Mark Tarry, who brings 20 years of experience of executive leadership in the rail industry, and with the success of a recent recruitment process for our Management Advisory Board, include welcoming Paul Gray, who, with more than 40 years' experience in Scottish Government, needs no introduction to members of this committee. This is in addition, of course, to the direct support and oversight from the Scottish Government, and I'm delighted to appear today alongside Leslie Fraser, Director General Corporate and SPPA sponsor. We both look forward to answering any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I begin where you finished? And just for our benefit, can we understand what the relationship is between you and the Scottish Government, the Director General Corporate? Because I think our understanding was that you are an executive agency of the Scottish Government and therefore do not have a sponsorship team that you work with from the Scottish Government. And so could you clarify what the lines of accountability and management are?
Absolutely. So you're absolutely correct. We are an executive agency. In that context, we have a governance framework document which sets out our terms of governance, which has been signed off by the Minister, and I report directly to the Minister and obviously to Leslie as my line manager.
I don't know whether Leslie Fraser, you can help clarify this relationship.
I act as a kind of coordinator and overseer of the work of the agency to ensure really that the agency is delivering against its strategic objectives, that we're confident in the governance and performance, and that the agency is playing its full part in public service reform as the Minister would expect, and that there's a route of escalation if there are concerns about anything in the agency. I'm also able, working with a Deputy Director who works alongside me to support the agency to just ensure that the agency is able to take advantage of expertise within the Scottish Government, as well in digital, cyber, in Centre of Expertise and Automation, for example. So it's an overseeing role. I think what used to be called the Fraser figure. No connection to myself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, whilst you're on the microphone, Director General, could I ask you whether the Scottish Government accepts the findings, recommendations and conclusions of this Audit Scotland report?
Yes, I think I too am delighted to see that the agency has an unqualified opinion from Audit Scotland. That's hugely important. I think I accept in full or very close to in full all of the Audit Scotland recommendations, and I think they've been enormously helpful in focusing many of the actions, the significant actions that the SPPA have undertaken in those areas. And I very much hope that the Auditor General, when he and his team return, will see significant improvements in the 25-26 audit. There's, of course, still more to do. It's a very complex area, pensions delivery, and the impact not just of legislative changes like McLeod remedy, but also of technology means that it's a real, I think, tipping point for agencies and organisations like SPPA in terms of the way that pensions delivery is undertaken.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the Auditor General understands that, but he nonetheless thought it was the right thing to do to lay before Parliament a Section 22 report, because, as he described when he gave evidence to us on the 18th of February, it's not just about individual pensioner interest, which of course it is, it's also about public interest. There is public interest about the failure to carry out the action that is required following the McLeod judgment.
Yep. I think it's absolutely right to scrutinise this, and I think it's hugely important that the Auditor General undertakes his proper role here, and indeed that there's proper scrutiny in the Parliament. The work of the SPPA, the Scottish Public Pensions Agency, in many ways is in step with what we're seeing as far as we understand it up and down the whole of the UK. This has been an enormously complex enterprise for all pensions administrators to provide. And I am assured that the Scottish Public Pensions Agency has put in place the right governance, the right processes, the right kind of improvements in order to be able to do this in as sensible a way as they possibly can. Of course, I absolutely accept, as does Dr. Patharana and colleagues, the impact on individuals, and that's hugely to be regretted. But I am assured that the right ingredients, if you like, are in place for the agency to be able to deliver from here.
OK, but we take advice from the Auditor General,
Of course.
and he's laid before us, as members of Parliament, a report, a Section 22 report, in which his conclusion, paragraph 23, is, and this is a report, bear in mind, that was published just 6 weeks ago, so it's a very current analysis. He says, I am concerned about SPPA's progress in meeting its 2015 remedy obligations and about its capacity to deliver outstanding cases by the extended timescales. Mm-hmm. So again, I'll put that first of all to you, Leslie Fraser. How do you respond to that?
Well, I've discussed this with Stephen and the team at SPPA, as indeed has the Minister. And I've also looked in detail at the management response to the Auditor General's report. And I think that there's a strong set of actions in place now to look at areas like forecasting for members about the different circumstances that apply to each individual and when they might expect to see their remedy solution come forward. That they've got the appropriate governance in place and the work has been done to strengthen both the Management Advisory Board and the Audit and Risk Committee and the way that it works and interacts with the senior team at SPPA. And I'm also really encouraged to see the work that's in place around digitisation and automation and the way that that's been able to come in and help and support in this. OK,
Dr Pathirana, can I put to you the paragraph 23, which I just read out to Leslie Fraser? How do you respond to that?
So I think it's absolutely right for the Auditor General to ask these questions and raise those concerns. The data that the Auditor General was basing the report on, even if it was only published recently, dated back to progress at an earlier point in the autumn. You'll see that in the data in the audit report. We have made significant progress even since then. I was just sharing with FPAC today. At that point in the time of the Auditor General's report, we hadn't started issuing statements for firefighters. We're ahead of target for that. We've just hit 30% for NHS. We're at kind of 90% for police, and we're making progress on teachers as well. So in terms of the progress I'd anticipated and set out when I was last in front of FPAC at the end of the year, we're still on the time frame that we're setting out. At the moment, I think we need to do more work to improve our programme delivery, and we're working on that. But I have confidence in the timeframes that I've set out, and I hope to, over the next period of time, assure Audit Scotland of the progress we're making on that respect. And with that, I hope that will be reflected back in any future audit report that Audit Scotland chooses to provide you with.
OK, and Leslie Fraser alluded to the fact that her understanding was that your progress was broadly in line with that of agencies in England and Wales. But again, the Auditor General said that, of course, it's not the only provider facing this in the UK, but there was optimism bias in communications. How do you respond to that?
So the Auditor General there is reflecting exactly what I said to the committee last year, the FPAC committee last year, and I think, as I said in my opening statement, pensions providers up and down the country didn't fully appreciate the full complexity of delivering remedy. In particular, one of the challenges was that they'd anticipated that their pension platform providers would be able to provide that dual calculation functionality. That wasn't possible for many providers, including ourselves, so that meant we had to develop solutions ourselves. If I could have my time again, I would go back and communicate differently with members around that. And again, I've said this before. I think that underestimation of the complexity, and again I've said this before to previous committee. If we had been different to that, if we hadn't underestimated complexity, we would have been unique across the UK.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think the shared problem UK-wide illustrates that foresight, and of course the legislative deadlines set out by the UK Parliament around this weren't backed up by a thorough understanding of what was involved in the delivery, which is why there are provisions within the legislation to allow scheme administrators to extend the timeframes.
Okay, but you mentioned in correspondence with, you've mentioned the Finance and Public Administration Committee a couple of times. You've had some correspondence with the convener of that committee, Kenny Gibson. And in correspondence, for example, going back to October last year, you said that your progress was broadly comparable with other schemes. And you cited the 85% of the work, now 90% in respect of the police scheme. When you use the expression the work, what do you mean by that? Do you mean issuing statements, or do you mean making sure people are now drawing the right pension?
So what I mean is giving people the choice. The goal of McLeod Remedy is to ensure people have a choice between their care and final salary pensions. That's in relation to delivering what are called remedial service statements. I also shared, just again for your interest, because we've almost completed the police work, we now have a good understanding of how many people are already on the best possible pension. So we know that over 70% of people are already on the best possible pension. So there are obviously 30% of people that might choose to change. And of course, they've got up to a year to make that decision on changing. That's up to them.
Yeah, but I mean, if I put my feet in the boots of a retired firefighter, they're looking at 0% of remedial service statements.
So they were looking at 0% when the audit report was done. As of yesterday, we'd issued 37% of those.
Okay.
So again, we're making good progress through that, and that's ahead of where we'd have predicted at this point in time.
Okay, so my final question on this then is, again, you wrote, I think, on the 17th of February 2026 to Kenneth Gibson, convener of the Finance and Public Administration Committee, where you had an annex showing comparative rates of uptake and statements being issued and so on. But in that Annex Point 5, there was no mention whatsoever of firefighters. Why was that? I mean, what's the position overall in England and Wales, for example? Are they so far behind with the firefighters scheme as you are?
So I think one of the challenges, obviously in trying to answer the convener's question, one of the challenges we've had is getting reliable data, publicly available data. We've managed to get that for police. We haven't managed to get that for fire. We obviously had hoped Treasury would be collecting data and being able to provide it, but they haven't. We do know anecdotally where things are broadly. I would say we're slightly further behind on fire than where I'd like to be, but there's some very good reasons why it's different in Scotland, which I can outline to you around that.
Okay, well, we might get to that, but in the interest of moving things along, I'm going to invite Graham Simpson to put some questions to you. Graham.
Thanks very much, Convener. Leslie Fraser, the Convener asked you at the start whether you accepted the recommendations of the report in full, and you said, yes, I do, in full or close to in full. Yes. So does that mean in full or not?
It's particularly, I think, in relation to the challenge of being transparent and communicating clearly with members affected by the remedy solution. So I think the Auditor General is right to highlight that this is a challenge, and it's hugely important, including that members can trust the SPPA and other pension providers in respect of this. But it's an enormously complex task to do, as I understand it, given that individuals can be affected by multiple different personal circumstances that will affect how easy or difficult it is to be able to model for them and give them a projection. And really, in order to be able to give them an assessment of when they might get their remedial service statement, you virtually, as I understand it, have to do the work. I'm sure that Dr. Patharana and colleagues can give you more information on that. But I think the point about a lack of transparency, I accept the point in principle, but I think the challenge of being able to give individual confident assessments is enormously complex.
So is there an element of the Auditor General's report that you're not comfortable with?
It's particularly that aspect where I feel there are particular difficulties and challenges in being able to be as clear and transparent as I know SPPA colleagues would want to be with members affected. It's very understandable. Everybody wants to have access to, robust, correct information as soon and whenever they want it. In this circumstance, it really is hard to do that.
Okay. And Dr. Patharana, in your letter to Mr. Gibson of the 17th of February, if I can just quote a section of that, you say, I understand Audit Scotland's position is that while it's recognised that this is a UK-wide issue, the scope of the Auditor General's remit only extends to SPPA, and therefore Audit Scotland cannot make an informed, comparable assessment of progress in other public sector occupational pension schemes. However, I would suggest that this wider context is important in considering the Auditor General's key messages. So are you saying there that the Auditor General, given that his restrictions, has missed something?
Well, not that it's missed something. It's more that it would have been helpful, I think, to know that wider context, because the Auditor General rightly is saying, okay, here's a deadline. You're meant to deliver by this deadline. You've not delivered, and then obviously set out the things as the auditor sees them. If it's set in that UK-wide context, it's easier to understand. Well, if we, the SPPA, had delivered all this stuff to the time frame, well, one, it would have been impossible because we hadn't had the guidance from the UK government in time, so that would have made it impossible in the first instance. And two, we would have been an exception. So why was it so difficult? Because an exercise like this sort of level of change to pension schemes has never been conducted before. It's thrown at complexities nobody ever considered were possible, because it's not just about providing people with two calculations. You've got to factor in all the different elements of the different pension rules under each scheme. You've got to be able to provide that duality next to each other. You've got to be able to factor in tax considerations. For some schemes, you have to factor in repayment considerations, interest considerations. So there's lots of different factors that. So it's an unprecedented exercise, and I think it's quite reasonable in the context that pension administrators, and this goes back slightly before my time, underestimated the scale of the challenge, whether that be the SPPA or other pension administrators across the UK.
So your basic message is, well, it's not just us. There are other people struggling.
Well, that's
with
a
this
fact.
as well. Well, I know it's a fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. You mentioned earlier. You said you've got a pension provider, a pension scheme provider.
Platform provider.
A platform provider.
Yeah, so obviously in the SPPA we administer pensions, but like other pension schemes, we're dependent on a digital provider to provide the digital solutions we use. For us, that's a company called Hayward, yeah. Hayward.
And how long have they been in position with you?
We've been with them for a long time, but it's under a new contract that which we have with them over the last couple of years now that we're into that contract.
And I asked when we had the Auditor General in front of us, and I accept that pensions is incredibly complicated. It's very complicated if everyone has to do this work manually. How are you progressing with digitising the whole process? So
it would be good to help you there, because I think that's come through in probably the way in which we've explained things. So the manual nature of it isn't that whatever it is technically possible to automate within our systems, we're automating. The manual elements of it are really where we need to make manual interventions within our digital system to correct data and information to enable it to enable us to put it together. So what we find is for the more simpler cases, we're able to digitise those, able to automate those processes very effectively. But for some of the really complex cases, it needs much more manual intervention. And then the other, maybe I'll actually pass over to Francis, because there's a few things Francis can share around this will help you understand it better.
So in the system, there are certain calculations that are built into the system that help us to manage our pensions on an ongoing basis. And from a remedy perspective, these members have already retired. They are already receiving a payment. What we need to do now is go back and retrospectively look at that. For members who are protected under the rules, it's quite a simple calculation that we're able to do. So that's where we started our calculations, and we were able to replicate them. For every other type of scenario, we've had to take our calculations out of the system, but we're bulking them. So we're building calculators which are being assured by the Government Actuarial Department to enable us to do those additional calculations out of the system and then feed them back in again. So that's where the level of complexity comes, and we have started and able to automate things at a basic level where people are protected, and then we start to build the calculations on the back of that, depending on a number of different factors that will be particular to the scheme, the member and their particular circumstances.
And those calculations are done manually?
So they are bulked up and automated through a system, but originally when they're built, before you can move them into that calculation mechanism, they have to be done manually to work them out, and they're then assured by our Government Actuarial Department before we move those into an algorithm in a system.
Right, and that's what takes the time?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me why you prioritised issuing the remedial service statements to police over NHS teachers and firefighters?
So maybe I'll let Francis kick off with this and maybe add if need be.
So we had to start with a pilot. So looking back a couple of years ago, we started with police because police is a small scheme. The data that we have on our police scheme is particularly clean. It comes from one employer, Police Scotland, and we have that information provided to us digitally on a monthly basis. For our firefighter scheme, it's very similar. However, there are also other considerations under the firefighter scheme where there were continual professional development is now taken into consideration as part of a remedy for being accountable in the pension, whereas it wasn't before. And that's based on another piece of legislation, discriminative legislation that we're having to work with, called Booth. On top of that, we have NHS and teachers, and NHS and teachers supply us with data on a yearly basis, and that comes from several employers. So it was easier for us to start with the police scheme because it was small. There was fewer numbers of members, and we were able to have clean data to start working with.
But it just means the others have to wait while you work your way through the police. Is that all right?
No, so we've worked with them all concurrently, but obviously the information and the lessons that we've learned as we've gone through the police cohorts has driven a lot of our actions as to how we've started to manage the other schemes as well. On automation, it took us, I would say, nearly a year to build the automations. We were then able to use those templates to build the automations on the other schemes and bring the other schemes along much quicker.
Okay. So are you now on track to meet the revised timescales?
So I'm on yes. My objective, or our objective, is to have police will be 99% complete by the middle of the year, which is exactly in line with what the National Police Council in England are predicting for police in England. If anything throws us out from that, it'll be because of other factors probably out with our control. The fire and teacher scheme we'd expect to have completed by the end of the year, and we're on track to that. The NHS scheme, which as we've shared is a much more complex scheme, we're targeting the middle of next year, although we still expect to have the bulk of it completed this year. My intention was, obviously, I appreciate we're moving into a different parliamentary period, but obviously to report regularly back to FPAC on progress. And if I have any concerns about our ability to meet the timeframes we set out, is to set out what the challenges are, what we're doing about it, and what it means for members to the committee. So, and at the same time, for illustration, again to give you some assurance, we don't work in isolation. Obviously, we are talking to the other comparable schemes across the UK, particularly the NHS scheme, who are facing all the same challenges, and we are ahead of them in terms of delivery in England, in terms of our progress. And we're looking to, they're actually coming up to visit us in April, the team from there, and that's really so we can exchange information and knowledge. There might be things they've solved, we've not solved, things we've solved, they've not solved, and we can hopefully help each other out. So if there's anything we're able to do as an organisation to accelerate things, we will, although I wouldn't want to make any promises about our ability to do that at this stage.
Okay. Last one from me. Obviously, you didn't meet the original deadlines. So, are you aware of any planned action by the pensions regulator?
So we have regular engagement with the pensions regulator at every point during the remedy journey that we've been on. We've updated them on progress of things we've been able to do, not been able to do, and we'll continue to do so. The regulator is very understanding, because as they see all pensions administrators across the UK are in a very similar position. What they're looking for, and we're aiming to do, is one, that we're doing regular communication engagement with our members, and we've got a whole programme of communication engagement we're doing, which we can outline. And they're wanting to see positive progress, again, which we can show them. So that's where the regulator is at the moment. I'm sure if the regulator had any further concerns, they would be flagging them to us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on, can I just take you back to the police scheme? Because we were told in evidence we took on the 18th of February that one of the factors that might have influenced you as an organisation in prioritising the police scheme was the fact that 87% of all freedom of information requests were from police scheme members. In other words, they were mobilised, they were organised, they were putting pressure on. So obviously some of that prioritisation predates my arrival in the agency. It's been purely pragmatic in terms of the ability to move things forward, and the quality of the data is one of the key factors, and the quality of the data in the police scheme has been better. Like we've said, for the fire scheme, we are waiting on data from the SFRS, which meant we couldn't start it, which is why the figures you referred to earlier were 0 at that point last year, but have progressed now because we have the data and we can move it forward quicker. So yes, the police scheme are mobilised, but it's not been driving my or our prioritisation. So it may have been a factor. It's not erroneous to suggest that it may have been a factor.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't a factor at all?
It wasn't a factor.
So it's erroneous to assert that was one of the reasons?
Yes.
Okay, well, we've got that on the record. Thank you very much. I'm now going to turn to Colin Beattie to put some questions to you. Colin.
Thank you, I'd like to just touch on some of the challenges that applying the remedy encountered. Now, the SPPA reported that the progress with the 2015 remedy was heavily impacted by a number of issues, both internal and external. And just for the record, I'll mention them here. Reasons were including lack of preparedness within the SPPA to cope with the volume and complexity of cases, delays in guidance and clarification from HMRC, also from the government's actuary department, significant reliance on manual processes for complex cases, delays in obtaining reliable data from third parties, and a historic backlog of issues requiring remedial action, which is a pretty heavy list of issues. It seems strange that when this first arose, that these issues weren't recognised. The SPPA must have understood where they had to go to seek information, guidance and so on. And they must have realised that it wasn't going to happen within the timescale that SPPA anticipated. So what did you do about it? I mean, how did you cope with that?
So,
I mean, clearly you cope with it by delaying everything, but within that, internally.
so I think in terms of guidance from the UK government, there had been an expectation that would all arrive sooner, and there had been promises of it, but obviously it took longer to arrive. I think it hasn't stopped us doing work on prepare. You know, it's not that work is paused while those things are being clarified. Certain things we have been able to move forward in that context. I think the point I'd probably come back to, and I don't know whether this is where the point you're trying to make is, yes, there were, you know, and again, I can only speak for my time within the agency, but coming into the agency, it was clear to me that there was a transformation journey the organisation needed to go on. There's work that needed to be done to take the organisation to where it needed to be, in addition to McLeod Remedy. However, I'd probably separate that a little bit from the delivery of McLeod Remedy, because, you know, the progress of McLeod Remedy, again, is similar to progress across the rest of the UK. So even if the organisation had particular challenges and things it needed to address, it hasn't impacted the overall, relatively speaking, the timeframes compared to other comparator, you know, parts of delivery in the rest of the UK.
I mean, it does seem to me that some of the delays could have been anticipated. But let me ask you one or two questions specifically. As my colleague Graham Simpson asked you about the manual processing. Now, my understanding that the manual processing is quite a bitty thing and very individualistic. Each pensioner having a different profile. Is there any expectation that we'll have a fully automated pensions administration scheme, or is inherently, because of all that variety of different aspects that could come in, is it going to remain largely manual? So
let's I think there are two different things here. I think it's really helpful to separate out our vision for the future as an organisation, where we can and have the opportunity to move the organisation to a digital-first organisation where we are able to automate our processes. We have, you know, integrated calculators that can do all the things. So all of that is plausible. The challenge with McLeod Remedy specifically is what we're dealing with is historic pension records and historic pension data, which goes back you know, in many instances pre-2015, where these sorts of digital processes weren't available. That's what makes the McLeod Remedy challenge particularly challenging, because you can't fix all. What you can do is you can remediate the data, which is what we're having to do. That takes time and effort. But building a better pension process and service going forward is absolutely something we are doing, and we can share a little bit about some of the things that we're doing in that space, Chris.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we've been working on what we'd call stopping the bath from filling. So I think historically, data's come in from different sources in different ways. That includes from employer and from member. So, you know, from the employers, particularly NHS and teachers, there's several hundred employers spread across those schemes. And the way that they submit the data to us on a regular basis or on an annual basis has been subject to variance and variation. Moving the police and fire schemes to what we call an API, Technology Application Programme Interface, effectively an integration where the data flows straight from their system to ours, means that if we arrive at another situation in 5, 10, 15, 20 years where we have to run through remedial actions, those issues have been closed off, and we shouldn't face this recurrence of this data issue that we've had. We're moving the teachers scheme to that just now, so there's a number of teacher employers already on that system, and we have a schedule in place for moving the rest of the teachers employers to that. The NHS employers, it's a much bigger scheme. There's complexities there. We're in very early stages in discussion about outlining the plans that we want to build together with our NHS colleagues to move them to an integrated data transmission. From a member perspective, there's been a lot of foundational stones that simply weren't there or weren't in the right place. We've undertaken quite a range of activities over the course of the last year or so. We've delivered the new portal as we've outlined. What that allows is for members to access information quite readily available online. Where they have any queries, questions about that, they can select the drop-down menu and send that request into us. It's integrated into the system. Any information that they want to transmit to us comes through digitally, and we have a reduction of keystroke activity. So our staff don't have to transcribe information from one system to another and back again. So that's a step that has been completed again in the police and fire, and we've got a timeline of end of June to put that in place for NHS and teachers, and I'm comfortable with that time frame that we have just now. Through the digital process, so through the more complex processes or tasks that we undertake. So, for example, the retirement process, where a member wants to retire. Francis's transformation team have been busy actively working on delivery of a digital solution for that, focused on our NHS members, to allow us to then roll that out to all of our pension schemes. Effectively, what that stops is a member having to fill out information on the form, send that to their employer, who add information to that, to send that to us. It's a multi-leg journey, and just now that takes place out of a system, and then it lands through and we upload that into our system. So it's a digital form that's been put together that will allow the member to track it through that journey, understand it much more. There's data validation built into that, so that there's less to and fro, so that if documents come through to us, we don't have to go back to the member to verify pieces of information that either may be missing, may be incorrect, may be illegible if there's handwritten forms in historically. So collectively just now, these 2-3 work in progress for employer data, member data, future retirement data coming through to us, that gives us a nexus point on which we can build future automation. Without those foundation stones in place, we simply can't do that just now. It's simply impossible for us to do that. So it's important that we get these in place. We've passed several milestones in this journey successfully. We've got several, the police and fire engaged, the portal that they're submitting data through just now, that went live just a few weeks ago. And as I say, there's other milestones scheduled for delivery in the next few months. So it's an ongoing piece for us. It's a long journey. It will not happen overnight. I think the difficulty in transforming where we've been, it's all quite detailed, heavy system technology requirements. The one thing I will say about SPPA over the course of the past couple of years, and me seeing the work that we've been doing, is the growing maturity we have around being able to build the development teams and the development standards. Our test team capability is stepped up again over the course of the last year or so. The fact is that if you ask our staff what are the main issues that they see, what are their frustrations, it's exactly the same as our member frustrations, and it's about the systems, and it's about the information, it's about the transmissibility of data. And I think it's fair to say that we're seeing that feed through into our people survey score results, where they're actually starting to look and say, yes, we can see there is a movement in the right direction. Does that translate to our members' experiences today? In part, in small areas, but iteratively, incrementally, and increasing over the course of the next year or so, we'll be able to utilise and leverage the technologies that we have available to us and fill some of those gaps.
Which leads me neatly to my next question. Obviously, investing in technology is not cheap, and I can only guess at what it might cost. Where's the money coming from?
So we obviously as part of, in the context coming into the SPPA, we've obviously set out our kind of plans for this year and future years as part of our financial strategy and forecasting. We've obviously set that out to Scottish ministers in terms of the investment that we need to make to improve, not just deliver McLeod Remedy, but improve the services we have. That's all reflected in the Scottish Government budget that's just been passed. So we have the money set for this financial year we're going into that will allow us to keep the organisation on the journey. Obviously, I'll have to wait to see into future years whether that resource funding continues. Within that context, yes, the investment needs to be made, but there are opportunities for savings in the longer term as part of the public service reform agenda, which I'd hoped to better deliver on, although I think it does need 2 or 3 years of consistent investment to get us to that place. So one thing I would just share with you, and I know it's kind of going a little bit wider than your question, is we do benchmark ourselves as an organisation in terms of cost and performance against other pensions administrators, both UK, Canada and US, and comparable organisations in terms of size and scale. We are slightly above cost, the mid-cost at the moment for an organisation of our type in the UK, although in the last year we've moved in the right direction, which is good to see. Compared to the UK remains the cheapest place in among those countries to actually administer pensions. That's largely because pensions administration is fully contracted out, which obviously we're not. We have in-house services providing high-quality jobs in the borders. So we have a mixed model pension platform, but in-house. So we're never going to be as cheap as some other models, although you will have seen recently from various different bits of media that those other models have their problems too when everything is contracted out.
Can I just clarify, are we coming up with a different solution here in Scotland to the rest of the UK? Is what we're doing here comparable? Can it be duplicated across the board?
So there are different setups in different pension administrators across the UK. There's more contracting out of services in their entirety. For example, Civil Service Pension Scheme, Teachers Pension Scheme. However, the NHS pension scheme in England does most of it in-house, and a couple of other ones have different models. So we're kind of in the middle. I think we have a good model. It gives us more control, give Scottish Government more control, and I think, and one of the things I think, again, you will have seen this, one of the things that's been really important to us through the McLeod Remedy journey is ensuring that we're able to enable, we haven't slipped in terms of our delivery of normal pension retirals, okay, which is our core business. We've got to assist 12,000 people a year with their retirement journeys. We've kept that on track. In fact, we've actually improved our performance over the last year in terms of in that space. So that I think is a really important part of what we're trying to achieve here.
So there's no actual savings achievable by having a common system?
I think not at the scale you're talking about. What we might, because even within, for example, the SPPA, because we have 4, so there are similarities between the police and fire scheme in terms of the system functionality that's needed and how it works. For NHS and teachers, they're different again, so we don't always get the scaling opportunities that you might hope based just on the sheer number of members that we have. There is some, but because the schemes are so different, you have to have the ability to address the needs of individual schemes, and that requires effort. Sorry, Chris.
I think in terms of the system we use, it's a system that's adopted by other public sector pension scheme administrators. So we're using a system that is commonly used by our comparators. I think it's fair to say though that the ability of the technology providers in the face of the seismic impact of Remedy has not been any greater than our ability to respond to it across public sector pension schemes. So it's, we're using the similar systems, we're using similar technology and methodology, and I think that where we can drive economies, we absolutely are doing so. And I think, certainly where we've talked about our use of Engage, our use of the API technologies that we're adopting for transmission of data, that's leveraging the systems that are there that are used by others.
And just one last question. You've obviously got regulatory responsibilities. What's the impact been of applying this remedy to your responsibilities in that regard? And also you had a backlog in any case. What progress have you made to dealing with that?
So it's So it's worth sharing with you that there are a lot of... McLeod Remedy is one particular challenge. It's obviously the one we're focused on today. But we have other legislative projects like Booth, which Francis mentioned in relation to fire. There's Matthews in relation to fire. This also we're working on. We've got the UK pension dashboards, which we've, phase 1, have delivered connection to that on time. There's another phase later in the year which may be delayed, not by us, but by the UK government if they decide they're not ready for it. So there's a number of different legislative commitments we have to deliver on. We're working on all of them. We're balancing our resources across those at the moment. In terms of various different corrective exercise, we've got a programme of work in place to address those, and we're working... Obviously, we're in any instances, resources are always finite. You prioritise and manage your resources across to meet the most important things, and that's what we continue to do. But we have all those different things in our line of sight.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
I'm now going to invite Joe Fitzpatrick to put some questions to you. Joe.
Thank you, Convener. I've got a couple of questions around governance and transparency, and obviously the opening remarks, you acknowledged the challenges around transparency, and Leslie Fraser, you responded to Graham Simpson's question in some detail around some of the aspects of transparency, but so we don't need to go over those bits again. But I think it's really important that we do have full transparency going forward. So I think you mentioned a couple of areas where you thought that could be approved. You talked about the Finance Committee, and so I wonder if we could just hear what it is that you can do to make sure that I think the 3 stakeholders groups that you have, so there's the scheme members, the SPPA's Audit and Risk Committee, and then there's the Scottish Parliament, how you're going to make sure going forward that there is full transparency to those 3 organisations on the remedy, but maybe also on wider issues. So if something else was to go wrong in another area or go better than expected, how do we make sure that those 3 key stakeholders are kept up to date?
Okay, so as I shared, my intention would be to update the committee, particularly the FPAC, but no doubt PAC in future periodically on progress. And I had previously offered to FPAC to come out and visit us, and actually, hopefully, the future committee as convened might be interested in doing that as a new committee, so that'll be good. So again, my intention: appropriate regular communication on progress, particularly around any kind of issues we're experiencing. In terms of and I'll come to Francis on the set of things we're doing around member communication, which has moved on significantly since October last year. But in terms of we have quite a complex governance structure. In addition to the, actually, ARC, you were particularly interested in me answering the question on. So even particularly since the Auditor General provided you with a report, the view of my Audit and Risk Committee currently is that things have improved significantly. And a lot of those problems date from a time gone by where we had some particular resource challenges that kind of led to things being challenging in terms of our ability to support the committee, the Audit and Risk Committee properly. So I think they feel much better supported. We have a really good close working relationship, and as I said, a really experienced chair in place there that works very close with us, and I think importantly works with the agency with where it is at the moment. They need to meet you where you are to help you move forward, and I think they're proving that they're very good at doing that. Francis, on the member.
One of the things we've done is to look at the frequency and the specificity of the information that we're sending to the members. So we last year in October, we wrote to all of the members who were still outstanding. So again, we're talking about immediate choice members. These are people who are in receipt of a current pension and that they're now being offered a choice to see whether they want to alter or change that pension that's already in payment. So we had written to them explaining the delays in getting those choices out to them. We're now writing to them on a 6-monthly basis, I think 3 months in some of the smaller schemes. And we're looking at their specific circumstances, being very clear on what it is that's impacting that member not getting it, and giving them the next date of when we'll write to them if we have not given them it. So we're going to smaller, specific update dates that we're giving them, whilst we're still clear on making sure that any larger residual risk is addressed in part of that communication. On top of that, we have a full communication strategy. So we have member newsletters that we send out. We send those to active members, who are people who are paying into the pension scheme at the moment, and we send those to retired members. We also have an up-to-date website that has lots of information on the website, and on the website we also put really helpful videos to allow people to understand not only MacLeod's remedy, but for when they've received their remedial service statement, there's items on there talking people through exactly what it is that's telling them, how to use that and how to send that information. We've done retirement webinars, we've done tax webinars, and we'll continue to do those. The communication that we send out to members, we also run that through subsets of our pension boards, and we have joint working groups and technical working groups where we've got members on that who are employers as well as union reps, and we're making sure that we're running through the comms that we send out with those individuals before we send them.
Okay. Thanks. You mentioned the Audit and Risk Committee, and I guess there had been a concern that that committee hadn't received the information and support they required. You said there was getting more support. Are you confident that they are now getting the information and support they need to do their job?
Yeah, so a quote from our ARC meeting in February from the chair: in our view, governance and scrutiny ranges have improved during the tenure of the current executive team. We are confident both MAB and ARC are now better placed to undertake their core functions going forward.
Okay. One of the things flagged by the auditor is the reduction in formal meetings of both that committee and the scheme pension boards. Why are there less formal meetings, and is that not a challenge in terms of transparency? Is it?
Well, so one, there isn't a reduction in the number of meetings of ARC or MAB. There had been, I think, a meeting of MAB that didn't. There had been a couple of meetings that didn't happen in that audit period because of resource constraints.
Right.
But we have 4 meetings of ARC, and we're committed to having 4 meetings of MAB a year. Some of the formats of those MAB meetings have changed, because one of the bits of feedback that so one of the things I did coming into the role was review the governance arrangements. They hadn't been updated for quite some time. In particular, so obviously, and that was all agreed with the minister. We introduced a joint meeting. One of the meetings we introduced was a joint meeting between our MAB and our pension boards, and that's because, in part, obviously we have 4 pension boards. They were having 4 formatted formal meetings a year, if you want to call them. That's 16 meetings a year. It's a huge resource drain. A lot of what we're talking about in those is duplicated. What we've done is we've introduced a different format which reduces the number of meetings a year from 16 to 10 meetings a year, some of which we bring those pension boards all together to talk about common things across the schemes, and one of those is with our MAB, so they get to meet members of our MAB. Now, the bit that I want to stress is something that wasn't happening previously, that is happening now, is we write with update to the pension boards every month, telling them about progress, not just about MacLeod Remedy, but all the different things going on in relation to the scheme. It's an opportunity for the pension board members to come back and ask questions, for us to answer them. So there's much more regular contact, not just actually with the pension boards, also with MAB, because we've done a number of changes around that. Obviously, some of it goes beyond formal meetings, if you know what I mean. So, for example, I've paired every one of my exec team members with a member of MAB. They have regular monthly catch-ups. They might get those MAB members might get involved in some of the things that is happening in that area. The business and sport. They sit on our transformation board. They sit on our we have people sitting on our remedy program board. So these are ways in which I've kind of strengthened the governance around the piece.
So I guess it sounds what you're saying in terms of reducing the total number of meetings by still having the same number, actually, of meetings that each different parts of the pension boards would attend sounds sensible. Are they still formal meetings that would be minuted? And
well, that's a good point. So I think that's one of the things where I think we, having learned from that change. We're going to make a point of making a proper note of those meetings where we bring everybody together and make sure we're picking up actions and carrying them forward in a way that we hadn't done with the first couple of times we did that. So I think that's an opportunity for us to improve on that process.
So I think that's really important, because that gets back to transparency. If you're not taking a note of it, then...
And just to share with you, before we made any of those changes, we talked it through with the regulator, asked for their view. They were supportive of what we were undertaking and trying to do in the context, because we're quite an unusual pension agency, because we administer multiple public sector schemes. Most pension agencies administer single schemes. So for us, it gave an opportunity to be a bit more efficient, get the cross-learning going between the schemes, and actually save on kind of the resource intensity from the organisation's point of view.
So I think that makes sense. I think there is a need to make sure that's more transparent. I think maybe the auditors should have been able to identify that someplace at what was happening, and it's really important for audit that those meetings are not just happening, they're happening and minuted and recorded. Leslie, are you comfortable with where clearly there was something not right there, and are you comfortable that it's moving into a better place?
Yes, I think the improvements were necessary. As I say, the impact of McLeod Remedy plus the other legislative changes that have affected pensions have really meant that it's been very necessary, I think, to look and make sure that the governance arrangements are appropriate right the way across what's quite a complex kind of ecosystem, really, of governance. I am assured by the process that's been undertaken here. I also meet Stephen monthly. And I also meet quarterly with the chairs of the Management Advisory Board and the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee. And it's an opportunity for us to look particularly at the risks facing SPPA. And also, I'm really clear, and I think it's very much understood by those chairs and by board members, that I am approachable at any point if there was any concern, whether it was flowing through the proper governance arrangements or not. That is a regular opportunity to hear. So I think there are good arrangements in place, and I think it's very important that we continue to keep those under review and updated as McLeod Remedy flows through, as Dashboard comes on, on stream, and as we see what opportunities there are for digital improvements as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Convener.
Thanks, Joe. And now for a final series of questions, I'm going to invite the Deputy Convener, Jamie Green, to put those to you. Jamie.
Thank you very much, Convener. Good morning to our guests. I'm going to start actually by covering, it won't be a huge surprise to you, the article in this morning's Herald, which I have in front of me, and it did raise a few questions for me that I wanted to pose to you. I think the first maybe is just a point of clarification, and that's just to, obviously this is a newspaper article, so I want you to be able to put on the record the veracity of any claims that are made therein. On the issue of the police overpayments, can you just clarify or confirm the claims in the story that there has been I'll use the phrase U-turn on the issue, how that came about, and specifically for the benefit perhaps of anyone watching the session, will the SPPA absolutely not be chasing anyone for overpayment?
Okay, so thank you. So the claim is nonsense. And it's a good example as well of some of the kind of, as we work through Remedy, and I suspect this will happen as we go forward with the other schemes, we come across things that are happening that we need to consider as part of that. And of course, it became clear at the end of last year that the National Police Council in England was advising or encouraging pension administrators, particularly in England, but obviously across the UK, to consider whether it should write off these police ill health overpayments. And the last position from them was only issued on the 31st of December. Now, of course, we have to then take that into account and consider what does that mean for our scheme. So maybe just stepping back a little bit further from that, a process we've been approaching, how we'd approached this before, because again, I'm accountable to you in the context of the Public Finance Manual, making sure that's been applied properly. and also within the context of UK pensions legislation, which means you don't take any form of write-off seriously, whether it be on an individual or collective basis. And what we'd done is we'd made the decision prior to that to write off any historic payments over 5 years old, because there were legitimate justifications that we could do that, and then obviously look to reclaim the balance as part of the calculation process going forward. Obviously, with the position taken by the National Police Council in England, what they had said was they'd encourage everybody to do this within the context of the finance rules they're operating within. Now, what we did, and with that, is we took that to ministers, because it's within the context of being an accountable officer. I'd exercised the full extent of the freedoms I could do to deliver that. I didn't have the authority or powers to go beyond that. Now, to do that, we needed to put advice to the minister on the basis of which any form of collective write-off could be done. So the normal way under the SPFM would be you can write off money on an individual basis if you can demonstrate hardship on a case-by-case basis, which is where we would have gone previously. Now, ministers were able to consider that advice. I'm really pleased to share they came to the view that they would that they were able to consider the advice, and they came to the view that they would like to do a collective write-off. The evidence stacked up that that was a reasonable option to exercise in this instance. And I must stress it's in this specific context that these 200 or so affected individuals found themselves in. We'd also, I should stress, we'd only ever issued 60 remedial service statements to that cohort of 200, and only to people where, in net terms, didn't owe us money. We purposely held back anybody that had held money while we waited for the outcome. And what we'll be doing, and we've written to all those members individually, will now be saying that you outline the minister's decision, and and obviously the knock-on impact of all of that is we have to make adjustments to the calculator. We have to have it assured by the government actuary so that we can actually do the calculations in this slightly different way that we now need to do them, taking into consideration tax and interest considerations as you do. That obviously has a slight impact on the timeline for delivery for those individuals. Hopefully, a better outcome for them. So hopefully they're pleased with the decision that ministers have made. So I hope that gives you some sense of both how we've taken that forward, and it's illustrative of the sort of thing we've done throughout this process, and the sort of unknown unknowns we come across and then have to react to and decide how to deal with.
Okay, thank you for that. Just to clarify, which bit of the story was nonsense?
Your words were that we've done a U-turn.
Okay, so there was no U-turn. Okay.
No, what we've done is we've reacted. We've seen what's happening. We've reacted to it, and we've taken appropriate action, which is kind of what you'd hope we would do.
No, I get that. No, but just for my benefit, sorry, and I'm taking this at face value, reading the story. But so, prior to the decision by ministers, which I presume is a decision only they could make because the written off finances would be presumably backfilled by the Scottish Government. So that's only a decision they could make. I understand that. It's not a decision you could make. But prior to that, where was the SPPA seeking to recover overpayments? A. B. Were any overpayments recovered? And C. Will any of that money be refunded? Because in that sense, that is a U-turn from your current position to where you were at.
So we would have sought to, if we'd stuck with the original position, we would have sought to recover overpayments. We never sent out any remedial service statements which would have meant the need to recover money, because obviously there are people that would be in different circumstances around all of that. So we only issued them to people that their net position was we still owed them money, if you see what I mean. So we will need to reissue those statements to those 60 people where we write off. But we won't need, obviously, we'll obviously reprocess the other remaining 140 odd.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to labour it, but it's important to get the facts on the record, and that's giving you the benefit to do that. But the good news is, I suppose, just to summarise, the good news is anyone who had been overpaid will not have to pay the money back.
In the context of ill health overpayments? In
the context of police pension ill health overpayments. Yeah. Just to get it on the records for people that may be concerned about that. Okay. And government ministers have agreed that any cost to that will come to you, that you won't have to fund that from your current resources.
Yeah, it's all been worked through, and
Yeah.
there's a solution in place for that.
Okay, that's helpful. All right, thank you. Can I just ask on a wider point, and it is also was covered in the article, but does relate to a longer term issue, and that's that my understanding is that there had been individuals who had brought to the attention of the agency issues and concerns about particularly police pensions as far back as 2016, so that's some time ago. I did want to ask, and I don't need to get into the details of individual cases, because I appreciate you probably won't want to talk about individual cases regarding staff members, that is, not your clients. Were those concerns that were raised at the time related to the miscalculations and the subsequent overpayments, or were there separate issues that were raised, and have they been dealt with since?
So again, you know, the case that is being referenced in the context of that article is being misrepresented. There was, at the time when those concerns were raised, and this is obviously going back quite a number of years, they were investigated fully at the time by our auditors, who found that there was nothing wrong with the calculation at the with the calculations. So at the time, you know, so to put it into context, it was, you know, there wasn't a problem. It was an inaccurate claim that somebody had made.
Okay, yep, you don't need to elaborate any further. I'm just going with what's in black and white in front of me. In a newspaper article. In a newspaper article, indeed. Which is why it's important we...
Keep it moving, Jamie, keep it moving.
That then leads to maybe a wider question, and that is what is the culture at the SPP at the moment, and do you feel that there's sufficient safeguards for whistleblowers or anyone who has concerns within the agency to come forward with them? Is the culture, has that improved somewhat in the last decade, or since you've taken over?
So you know, this, again, kind of sitting in that wider context, and I shared a little bit of this with FPAC as well, but you know, coming in, agreeing to take on the responsibility for this role with Leslie, I knew that the organisation had its challenges. I knew that things needed to be improved, both in terms of the service and the organisation more broadly. One of the things that kind of caught my attention really was the level of, and we've got fabulous people, but the level of staff engagement for an organisation like this felt low to me. So we had an engagement score of 55%, and that I would stress it's not been above 55% in the last 10 years. So that was one of my key focuses, supported by my leadership team coming into the organisation. I'm really pleased to share with you, kind of a year and a half in, that engagement score is now sitting at 61%, which is above Scottish Government, and with a leadership change score again higher. Now, it's the start of a journey, there's more to do, but I've got, you know, and that's under the significant pressure the organisation's under. The culture, whatever the culture was, the culture is significantly improving. We've also updated our whistleblowing information and guidance to members, because there's lots of different routes people can take to whistleblow. Obviously, we sit within this framework provided by Scottish Government, and we're making sure all of that is highlighted to staff. And it's one of the areas our Audit Risk Committee have been interested in as well. So to reassure you, I think you know, things are moving in the right direction. There's lots to do, but I'm comfortable with where we are. Okay, great. Thank you for that update. And finally, I noticed in the letter from the Minister was talking about extra resource that you received from the Scottish Government, including, I believe, you've recruited 100 extra staff. What does that take your total staffing levels to at the moment, and why the need for so many people? Was it simply to deal with the McLeod remedy issue, or were there other requirements? I should stress as well that those staffing levels haven't just moved up by 100 in the last year. Some of that staffing started prior to my arrival in relation to the initial work around McLeod remedy. So, but yes, based on you know, data going back to kind of 2022, 23, our staffing levels have increased by approximately 100 people, which takes us to, in terms of FTE equivalent, to just a little bit over 400. I'm predicting we'll grow a little bit more before we shrink again. A lot of that additional capacity is largely been around delivering remedy, and what we've been doing really there is bringing in new staff, training them up to support business as usual processes, so we can release our more experienced staff with, with decades of experience to work on the McLeod remedy, the complexities of McLeod remedy. I'm not sure I've fully answered your question.
No,
though.
you did. You did. Thank you.
Okay.
The reason I mention it, I suppose, it's it's a 25% jump
Yeah.
over a short period of time, which does seem unusual. And I understand if that's for a short period of time, perhaps bringing in contractors to help with additional workload. But for a public agency, which is publicly funded, it is a substantial jump in baseload staff. So what I'm trying to get my head around is, are you expecting that to come back down again, or is this just a general increase in workload?
Yeah, so I, during my tenure, have not increased the overall permanent footprint within the organisation. We've brought people on fixed-term contracts up to two years. We've got an extensive training programme to bring people up to speed. And this is one of the other practical challenges. You can't bring 100 people in overnight. We brought them in phases, skilling them, integrating them into the business at different points in time to give us more capacity. We know we need that capacity, particularly for delivery of the NHS manual processing work because of the scale of it. So that's kind of one of the key things we're focused on. Obviously, I'd anticipate we've got other, as we've touched on, we've got other legislative projects, not the only thing we're trying to tackle and address. Yes, I do expect the agency to shrink at the other end of this journey. And that's very much in our mind as a leadership team in how we do that in a kind of sensible, smart way, both for the people we brought in and the skills they've gained, but also for the organisation as a whole.
Okay, and my final question is, what would you say would be the primary lesson that's been learned from this whole experience? I mean, Section 22 reports are unusual for agencies such as yours. What is your key takeaway in terms of to make sure a future audit committee is not looking at another one? So
I for me, it's been, yeah, you're right. There's I think making sure that we're really sharing information and as clear with both, with our different stakeholders as we can about the actions we're taking, ensuring that our auditors understand those actions, I think is really important. I think it's been a bit of a perfect storm. I'd like not to walk into another situation where I find this many challenges that need addressing. And I think what I've needed to do, in particular over the last kind of year and a half, is bring in the right people around me to support the leadership of the organisation, which I feel I have now, and that's, I think, really helping bring the kind of stability that I'm looking for, and I think that's reflected in what I shared with you about the staff survey results in terms of the way the organisation is feeling about itself.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. We've been really up against the clock this morning, so I'd like to place on record my thanks to the committee for their discipline and cooperation, but also in particular, I understand, Dr. Pathurana, that you and your team have been in front of not only the Public Audit Committee this morning, but the Finance and Public Administration Committee this morning. So I admire your marathon skills in coping with the questions that have been thrown at you. And with that, can I thank you very much indeed for appearing before us this morning, Dr. Pathurana, to you, Francis Graham, Chris Nairns, and also from the Government Director General Corporate, Leslie Fraser. Can I thank you? We are about to close, but before I close, I just want to place on record that this is our last meeting in public of this parliamentary session, and it's my last committee as the convener, which has been, I have to say, a great privilege. In my view, the committees of this Parliament can lead parliamentary but also public debate, and I think above all others that's what this committee has done in this session. We've held public bodies to account, been the guardians of the public interest, and we've done it as a committee united, and for that I am truly grateful. But needless to say, we couldn't have done it without the support of the clerks, and I want to place on record our thanks as a committee to the ever-present Alison Wilson and Keith Curry, who've done a fantastic job over the last 5 years in supporting us, but also to Lynn Russell, Katrina Venters and Claire Mingis, who have been the clerks to the committee. We're very grateful to you. I have to also place on record our thanks to the parliamentary comms people who we've worked with, two of whom coincidentally shared surnames with two former leaders of the Labour Party, One I prefer much more than the other, the Labour leader, not the media officer, you understand. And to Linda Peters especially, we say thanks to you, to Spice for the support that they've provided, to Security for keeping us safe so far. There are still a few minutes to go. Can I also, on behalf of the committee, thank the broadcasting team who make sure that we are transparent and accountable. And for the same reason, can I also record our thanks to the official report team who work tirelessly behind the scenes. And in particular, on this occasion, I want to thank our long-standing sub-editor, Fiona Shaw, who, after working in this Parliament since 1999, is taking well-earned retirement next week. And we wish her well. And very finally, can I thank again the Auditor General for Scotland, Stephen Boyle and his team, for the outstanding work that they do, for the outstanding reports that they produce, and for the outstanding leadership that Stephen Boyle shows. And on that note, I will close the public part of this morning's meeting. Graham Simpson wishes to come in.
It would be remiss if the committee doesn't record its thanks to you as convener. You've been here all of this session. I was lucky to serve as deputy convener in the last session. You have overseen a number of changes in the committee, but the committee throughout this term has been united because of your leadership. I think you've been a fantastic convener, and I wish you all the best in the future, whatever it is you do. But you should leave, you should realise that your legacy is the great work that this committee has done under your leadership.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you. On that cheery note, official report, you can put down your pens. I will close the public part of this morning's meeting, and thank you very much indeed, Graham, for those words. And I will now move us into private session. Thank you.